John's office, perched on the 12th floor, overlooked the bustling streets, but inside, the world seemed far quieter, almost hushed. He had just arranged his desk, a scatter of reports, a family photo facing only those who came to sit before him, and a solitary plant struggling by the window, when Pam walked in, a whirlwind of papers in her arms. "Sorry to barge in," she said, her voice a soft intrusion. "Mr. Thompson said you could help me with the Henderson file." Her eyes, a calm shade of blue, hardly matched the flurry of her entrance. "Of course," John replied, motioning towards the chair across from him. He noticed how the light caught in her hair, turning it into a halo of soft browns and golds. As she settled down, the air between them filled with the scent of her perfume, subtle yet enchanting. They leaned over the spreadsheets, John pointing out figures, Pam asking insightful questions. Each brush of their hands as they exchanged papers sent a current through the air, charging it with an unspoken awareness. They were professionals, both married to others, yet in the confines of the office, their proximity bred a connection that neither had anticipated. Lunch hours became their sanctuary. They shared meals in the corner cafe, laughing over personal anecdotes, their conversations skirting dangerously close to confidences they hadn't shared with others in years. It was innocent. They would reassure themselves silently, just two colleagues enjoying a good chat. But as weeks turned into months, the lines began to blur. The office, once a place of straightforward business, transformed into a stage for stolen glances and lingering smiles. Their affair was an open secret, hidden in plain sight, cloaked under the guise of professional collaboration. One late evening, as rain pattered against the office windows, John found himself reaching out to tuck a stray strand of hair behind Pam's ear. The gesture was tender, too tender, and they both paused, the air thick with unspoken truths. "We shouldn't," Pam whispered, her voice barely above the storm outside. "I know," John agreed, his hand retreating but his heart pounding. They stood there, the distance of an entire room between them, yet never had they felt so close. The affair, as unacknowledged as it was, changed them. It was a secret dance of what-ifs and could-be's, a sequence of moments strung together by longing looks and whispered words. Yet, they knew it couldn't last. The foundation of their connection was as fragile as the silence that enveloped it, ready to shatter with the slightest misstep. In time, they parted ways, a new job for Pam, a promotion for John, life's inexorable push forward. Their last day was filled with unspoken goodbyes, their final glance a silent acknowledgement of what had passed and what could never be. Years later, they would both recall the quiet intimacy of those days, a fleeting chapter of whispered secrets and shared smiles. In their hearts, tucked away beneath layers of subsequent experiences, lingered the memory of that delicate affair, a reminder of how close two people could get when they shared a secret hidden in plain sight. Years had passed since Pam and John had parted ways, each absorbed into the weave of their own lives. Memories of their brief, shared intimacy had faded into the background, dulled by the monotony of daily routines and responsibilities. But fate, with its intricate design, wasn't quite done with them yet. It was a cool September evening when John received an email from Pam. It was brief, a sudden flicker in his mundane workday. In town for the weekend? Would love to catch up. Pam. A simple invitation, yet it stirred up a storm of memories, each more vivid than he cared to admit. Curiosity, nostalgia, perhaps a hint of what was once unspoken yearning, led him to agree. They decided on Saturday evening at her place, a casual affair, or so they told themselves. As John stood at her doorstep, wine bottle in hand, he couldn't help but notice how his heart raced just as it had years ago. Pam greeted him with a smile that reached her eyes, and in that instant, it felt as if no time had passed at all. The evening unfolded effortlessly. They talked about their careers, their families, the little and big things that filled their lives. Yet, beneath the casual exchange, an undercurrent of familiarity pulsed, pulling them back to a time when they shared more than just friendly banter. After dinner, they settled into the soft glow of the living room, glasses of wine in hand, the ambience intimate, shadows dancing on the walls. The conversation slowed, words becoming sparse, weighted with the thickness of the air between them. "I've missed this," Pam admitted, her voice a whisper against the backdrop of a soft jazz tune playing low. "Missed us?" John's response was a nod, his emotions a tangled web he dared not unravel. "Me too," he said, the truth of it surprising even himself. As the night deepened, so did their reconnection. It was as if the years had peeled back, leaving them raw, exposed, vulnerable yet comfortable in each other's presence. They talked about their affair, acknowledging its impact with a maturity they hadn't possessed before. It was something special, wasn't it? John mused, tracing the rim of his glass. It was, Pam agreed, her eyes reflecting the soft lamplight. Something I think we both needed at the time. The conversation paused, a silent agreement hanging between them. Then, almost naturally, they leaned in, a kiss born not out of desire, but out of a deep, resonating connection that had survived the years. It was an affirmation of their past, an acknowledgement of their once shared intimacy, rekindled for a moment not as a continuation, but as a closure. As the night came to an end, and John prepared to leave, they embraced, a long, meaningful gesture filled with mutual respect and a hint of sorrow for what could never truly be revived. "We should stay in touch," Pam suggested, a hint of reluctance in her voice. "We will," John assured, knowing well the complexities that life held. As he walked away, John felt a sense of peace. The chapters of their past, once blurred and unresolved, now lay between them as a beautifully written segment of their lives, concluded with the grace it deserved. Their affair, revisited and respectfully closed, would remain a poignant reminder of what once was, an echo of the past, resonating softly into the fabric of their futures. The evening had unfolded with a warmth and familiarity that neither Pam nor John had anticipated, drawing them into a moment of intimacy that blurred the boundaries of their past and present. However, the gentle clinking of keys at the front door shattered their brief escape as reality came crashing in. Pam's face drained of color as the door swung open, revealing her husband, Mark, standing in the threshold. His expression, a mix of confusion and rising anger, cut through the soft ambience of the living room. John, too, felt a cold wave of realization wash over him. They had crossed a line they hadn't intended to. "Mark, you're home early," Pam stammered, scrambling to her feet, her voice a thin veil over her panic. John stood more slowly, an awkwardness enveloping him as he faced Mark. "I was just leaving," he said, trying to keep his tone neutral, respectful. But the air was thick with tension, each word feeling heavier than the last. Mark's eyes darted between Pam and John, the pieces coming together all too clearly. "What's going on here?" he demanded, his voice a controlled calm that belied the storm brewing within. "It's not what it looks like," Pam began, but the cliché faltered on her lips, the truth too glaring to mask. She looked desperately at John, then back at her husband, her mind racing for the right words. John, feeling the weight of the betrayal, intervened. "Mark, I'm sorry. This isn't fair to you. We got caught up, and it was a mistake." His apology, sincere though it was, seemed to do little to ease the tension. Mark's gaze hardened, his initial shock giving way to hurt and anger. "In our home, Pam? With him?" His voice cracked slightly, the betrayal slicing through his composure. Pam reached out, her hand trembling. "Mark, I'm so sorry. It was a moment of weakness. It didn't mean anything." The words, intended to comfort, only seemed to deepen the wound. Mark shook his head, backing away from her touch. "I need some time to think," he said quietly, his voice hollow. Without another word, he turned and walked out of the room, the sound of the door closing behind him echoing like a final verdict. Left alone, Pam collapsed onto the sofa, her face in her hands, sobbing. John, feeling both responsible and helpless, lingered for a moment, unsure of his role in the aftermath. "Pam, I should go," he said softly, his own heart heavy with regret. "I'm truly sorry for all of this." Pam nodded, unable to speak, her entire body shaking with the force of her tears. John left the house, the night air cool against his flushed skin, his mind replaying the evening's events over and over. He knew that their fleeting reconnection had caused irreparable damage, the repercussions of which would ripple out far beyond this night. As he drove away, the reality of what had transpired settled in, a painful acknowledgement that their past, however poignant, should have remained just that, a memory, untouched and untarnished by the complexities of their present lives. After John left Pam's house, the weight of guilt and unease gnawed at him relentlessly. The drive home was a blur, each mile marker a reminder of the line he had crossed. Arriving home, he found his wife, Elaine, waiting up for him, her intuition already signaling that something was amiss. Elaine's eyes searched John's face as he walked in, reading the turmoil etched across his features. "Is everything okay?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. John hesitated, the truth burning on his tongue. Finally, he confessed, recounting the evening's events, the rekindled emotions, and the disastrous interruption by Mark. Elaine listened silently, her face a mask of stoicism that gave nothing away. When he finished, Elaine stood quietly, her reaction measured but her disappointment palpable. "I need some time to think about all of this," she said calmly, though her eyes betrayed a storm of hurt and betrayal. John, feeling both relieved and devastated by his confession, nodded silently. In the days that followed, Elaine grappled with her emotions, oscillating between hurt, anger, and a desperate need for retribution. It was during this tumultuous period that she encountered Mark, who was himself struggling to come to terms with Pam's betrayal. Their meeting was coincidental, at a local coffee shop where both had gone to find solace in the anonymity of public solitude. Recognizing each other instantly, they shared a table, their conversation initially awkward, but gradually shifting towards their mutual sense of betrayal. As they talked, a dangerous idea began to take root. Hurt and seeking to regain control over their wounded pride, they toyed with the idea of revenge, an affair of their own to mirror the betrayal they had endured. One evening, with emotions running high and judgment clouded by pain, Elaine invited Mark to her and John's home while John was away on a business trip. The house, usually a sanctuary of marital love and family, became the stage for their planned revenge. As Mark stepped through the door, the gravity of their decision seemed to hang heavily in the air. They moved through the evening mechanically, their actions driven more by a need to inflict pain than by genuine attraction or desire. However, as the night progressed, the reality of what they were embarking on began to sink in. Sitting together on the couch, a palpable tension between them, both Mark and Elaine faced the hollowness of their intentions. "This isn't right." Mark finally broke the silence, his voice low and conflicted. This isn't us. We're just hurting ourselves more." Elaine, her eyes moist with unshed tears, nodded in agreement. "You're right. This isn't going to heal anything. It's just making everything worse." The realization that their pain could not justify the harm they were about to inflict on each other brought a sobering clarity. Mark left shortly after. The air between them cleared, their brief flirtation with vengeance abandoned. In the aftermath, both Elaine and Mark faced the daunting task of rebuilding their marriages, knowing that forgiveness was a distant shore. Yet, they had discovered a mutual respect for each other's pain and a shared understanding that revenge was a path that would lead only to more destruction. Their decision to step back from the brink not only spared them further heartache, but also marked the beginning of a slow, painful journey towards healing and possibly forgiveness. After the tumultuous events involving confessions and near revenge, the relationships of John, Elaine, Pam, and Mark were frayed, teetering on the edge of irreversible damage. Despite the mutual decision between Elaine and Mark not to pursue a revenge affair, something had shifted irreparably in Elaine's heart. The weeks that followed were marked by strained silence and awkward conversations in Elaine and John's home. Elaine found herself often distracted, her thoughts returning to Mark, not because of what had almost happened, but because of the understanding and mutual respect that had unexpectedly formed between them during their honest discussions. One evening, after John had fallen asleep, Elaine lay awake, her mind racing. She couldn't shake the feeling that her marriage to John had been fundamentally altered. The trust was shattered, and in its place, a hollow void had grown, one that no amount of time seemed capable of repairing. Driven by a need for connection and understanding, Elaine reached out to Mark. Their conversations, initially cautious, gradually deepened, as both were navigating the rocky paths of their respective marital crises. Mark, too, found comfort in Elaine's company, her insight, and the unexpected empathy she offered. As weeks turned into months, Elaine and Mark found themselves drawn to each other for reasons beyond their initial shared hurt. There was an undeniable compatibility, and the intimacy that developed was not just physical but deeply emotional. They found solace in each other's company, understanding in their shared experiences, and a surprising joy that both thought was long lost. John, grappling with his own remorse and the slow disintegration of his marriage, was the first to broach the subject of separation. "Maybe we need space to figure things out," he suggested one cold morning, the chill in the air mirroring the emotional distance between them. Elaine agreed. The separation began as a practical arrangement, but quickly cemented itself as a pathway to divorce. During this time, Elaine's relationship with Mark, which had started under such complex circumstances, grew stronger. They were careful, mindful of the past shadows, but increasingly hopeful about a future together. Months later, when Elaine and Mark decided to move in together, it was with a cautious optimism. They were both keenly aware of the wounds they carried and the judgments they might face, but they also knew the strength of the bond they had forged through shared adversity. As for John, the end of his marriage was a painful but pivotal moment. It prompted a deep introspection and a reevaluation of his choices and actions. Though the path was rough, he began to understand the importance of honesty and the destructive power of unresolved desires. Elaine and Mark's relationship, born from the ruins of their previous lives, was a testament to their resilience and capacity for change. They entered this new chapter with a mutual commitment to transparency and respect, hoping to build something enduring, not from the ashes of revenge, but from the deeper understanding of each other's flaws and strengths. Thus, the story of crossed lines and changed partners concluded with a bittersweet symphony of lessons learned, hearts healed, and lives unexpectedly intertwined.